Then it's like a book with a long tail too.
That's what happened to the perfect record. Never made it this show. Also,
Yeah, like the books. There's the books that like probably a good piece, and then the ones that are a little longer.
yeah, I'd much rather have a long tail.
First year.
Perfect weapon.
Oh.
Cyber big September book, big landfall.
Oh, that's nice.
There may be no long.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on duty this summer, so I initially at least
Well,
the only one.
so I'm on New York Times.
Oh, oh, man, it's nice there. With the
Well, I'll be at the press conference.
tomorrow the only thing we have is
Right. They're going to schedule a probably be over here, and I think they should start tomorrow. I think that's what it's so much.
Oh, that
My
makes
guess
sense.
is it was just somewhere in there.
I was wondering why this public
Can't be as big or pain in the ass.
That's true. Well, I guess he could have, but maybe he figures enough is going on this year. NATO's history.
Yeah, I think I fly it back. Because I fly the little plane direct to you know, make it
And they honestly take another one back. That makes sense. I expected it to just be one.
The white hat, the white hat.
I did this wrong.
Small plane.
Well, yeah, he'll go to Texas. Or he'll get and then I think probably a
What days are?
It's Monday to Friday.
Okay, so that's gonna be enough.
So yeah, so there's one tropical and another tropical is going to
That's why.
yeah. Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'm so sorry to answer your question. Another Friday night.
Right.
Just for both. And then another Monday to Wednesday.
For the thing with the now.
Yes. Yeah.
Because everything I said before,
Yes. Forget it. So you do you travel? Maybe easier. Yeah. Yeah, we do need a lot of
I'm sure Jeff might try to
No, that's no, I'm just like to your point.
You're personally responsible for 7 million of the 77 million in losses.
Yes, that's just the way it has to be. Almost 18. Right. So there's no continuing play.
Yeah, I'm not playing right now. Too worried about getting injured before the wedding. No. It's more like when you have surgery on your
It's a gorgeous CMS.
Right, that's the problem. No, I get that.
He takes the steering wheel and unfolds it and throws it out the window. She doesn't It's a 1960s like deterrence theory. Where you were supposed to try to convince everybody you're crazier than the other guy. I said, that's a fun place to be before the convention.
Yeah, it's great, right? One month out.
Nearly bought a summer surface here and we do it. I think it's a really bad bumper. No, you probably get really good bargains except today.
Hey, Marco. I'm fine. How are you? I love you.
Last week that I was in Berlin.
90 degrees.
They said, because your badge has come through for,
Any hope in my
yes. So we have a hotel room for you.
That's her birthday. That's your birthday.
Be there, jerk.
Yeah.
Obviously, the US is not going to be able to offload.
Yeah, in the record, yeah. I got two shots, so.
When we pay taxes,
Oh, Well, the leftovers is what for. It's like a square with a little handle. They're in the boxes. Yeah, you'll see. It's pretty obvious. I actually took a few to,
True. Yeah. I mean, come on.
Just read all the way through.
Use your powers to get started. Yeah. It's the elites and the deep. It's the elite school elected and the deep state.
bad thing to do.
Yeah, so.
Power of it. Alright. Can I just play like the crutch for being plugged in? So you're getting excited about your wedding?
Yeah.
No, no, already. Whenever we were at this beautiful place, and I just remember the conversation. It's one of the first stories I ever wrote as a girl. Because my mother was a wedding photographer, so I had business. I was interning, people playing there. And I was like, this is great. Business weddings back then.
I never understood
It was, I can't remember what the price tag was. And then, you know, now, that was a long time ago. I just talked to all of them. It was really fun. Isn't it both?
Well, I was just thinking walking around like
Sunday.
all
21. You know what, it's not just
maybe I was
so
I just tried for Cheryl to get you into the dinner. I'm putting it back on.
You know when my grandma passed,
What they, because I don't think I've been invited to.
So I was kept putting it off.
Probably
Is it 2 minutes? I keep getting knocked off the neck.
What's up, buddy? How are you? How's the baby? Pardon me? Pretty much. About 6'10" already. Pardon me? Possibly one.
Hey, Turner. Hey, Ed.
Big play. All that.
Just before the
Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Happy Monday. It's going to be a great week. I have very long things, long toppers at the top. Just warning you all, no falling asleep, please. Okay, so we've gotten more strong economic news in recent days. On Friday, our economy created more than 200,000 jobs last month. Under President Biden's leadership, we have now created a total of 15.7 million jobs over the last 3.5 years. Yesterday, a record 3 million travelers were screened at airports, a sign that our economy is strong and Americans are back on the road for the summer in record numbers. Speaking of which, last week we sold 1 million barrels of gasoline to help lower gas prices ahead of the 4th of July, which saw the lowest gas prices in 3 years. And today, a new report from the Economic Innovation Group highlighted what the New York Times called a, quote, a remarkable comeback under President Biden. That report found that communities that have been lifted behind struggled under the last administration, what the Times called a particularly grim stretch under Donald Trump. But those communities are coming back under President Biden, with jobs growing more than 4 times faster than in the previous 4 years. Investments spurred by the president's Investing in America agenda are benefiting previously left behind communities. That's just some of the economic progress happening under President Biden. Watch out for more news in the coming days. Exciting. And next, I want to share highlights from the president's recent schedule, as well as looking ahead to the next 2 weeks. So over the last 10 days, President Biden has been hitting the road and meeting directly with the American people, as well as continuing his job as leader of the country. In the 2 days after the debate, he met with supporters in Atlanta, Raleigh, New York, and New Jersey. Last week, he delivered remarks on the Supreme Court, visited the D.C. Emergency Operations Center for a briefing on extreme weather events, hosted a Medal of Honor ceremony, and joined the First Lady for a 4th of July barbecue with active duty military service members and their families. Throughout the week, the president also spoke with leaders of the UK, United Kingdom, Israel, and the Republic of South Africa. On Friday, the president traveled to Madison, Wisconsin for a campaign rally. On Sunday, just yesterday, he held numerous events across Pennsylvania with elected officials, including Governor Shapiro, Senator Fetterman, and Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. He participated in interviews, including joining Morning Joe just this morning, and throughout, the president has engaged with elected leaders, including members of Congress, governors, and local officials. This week, President Biden will speak to national labor leaders of AFL-CIO, host the NATO summit to show the unprecedented strength of our alliance, hold a press conference, a big boy press conference, according to Justin Sink from Bloomberg, who's not here, but Josh, you are here, I see you. So that will happen on Thursday, and travel to Michigan on Friday for a campaign event. And next week, he will travel to Texas and Las Vegas. On July 15th, he will commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act at the LBJ Presidential Library in Austin, Texas. He will highlight the Biden-Harris administration's progress advancing civil rights and his vision to bring America together. On July 16th, he will address the 115th NAACP National Convention in Las Vegas, emphasizing the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to advancing racial justice and equity for all Americans, including Black Americans. On July 17th, he will speak to the UNODOS annual conference, where he will underline the Biden-Harris administration's historic accomplishments, including lowering prescription drug costs for America's seniors, lowering the Latino uninsured rate, and creating a Latino small business boom. And finally, I just mentioned the U.S. is going to be hosting the 75th summit, the NATO summit, right here in the United States, obviously in Washington, D.C. this week. NATO is the most powerful and capable alliance in the world, and President Biden is proud, very proud, to have worked to strengthen it and also expand it. So with that, the Admiral from the National Security Council is here to take your questions on that.
I do have a few things to get through, so I'll ask you to bear with me. As Crane mentioned, the President's looking forward to hosting the leaders from 38 different countries this week in Washington for a historic summit to mark the 75th anniversary of the NATO summit. This will obviously include the leaders of all our NATO allies, as well as NATO partners, including Ukraine, Japan, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea. Before we discuss the schedule, I just want to take a minute to discuss the context in which NATO leaders will be gathering this week. For 75 years, NATO has served a vital role in protecting the American people and in making the world a less dangerous place. NATO is the strongest defensive alliance in history, and today it is bigger, stronger, better resourced, and more united than ever before, in large part due to President Biden's leadership over the past 3 years. He's worked hard to expand the alliance by welcoming 2 new members, Sweden and Finland, and will officially welcome in Sweden this week. He has spent countless hours rallying the alliance in 2021 and 2022 to build a global coalition to respond to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and to provide indispensable support to that country. And I'll get more on that in just a second. The President has also strongly encouraged greater partnerships between the NATO alliance and friendly nations around the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, as you will see. And the President knows that the global threats and challenges that we all face, including from authoritarian actors and terrorist organizations, are inextricably linked. He has also encouraged our NATO allies to join him in making significant investments in our mutual defense and deterrence capabilities. Now, when the Biden-Harris administration took office, only 9 NATO allies were spending at least 2% of their gross domestic product on defense. 2% was the Wales pledge. That was the goal that every member of the alliance had swore that they would get to. Today, a record 23 NATO allies are at or above the minimum level of 2% of GDP on defense spending. More than twice as many as in 2020, and nearly 8 times higher than when the allies first set that 2% benchmark a decade ago. Now, just quickly turning to the schedule. Tomorrow evening, President Biden will welcome NATO leaders, and he and Dr. Biden will host a 75th anniversary commemoration event at the Mellon Auditorium. That is the site I think you all know when the NATO treaty was formally signed in 1949. On Wednesday, the President will hold his first bilateral meeting with the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, here at the White House. The President will also meet with the 32 members of the alliance at the Convention Center. And then later that evening, he and Dr. Biden will host NATO leaders for a dinner, again here at the White House. On Thursday morning, NATO will hold a meeting with the EU and with NATO's Indo-Pacific partners, that's Australia, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and New Zealand, to deepen our cooperation. And then on Thursday afternoon, there'll be a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council, after which the President will have an event with President Zelensky and nearly 24 of our allies and partners who have signed bilateral security agreements with Ukraine, just as the President did, as you saw in Italy a week or so ago. After that, the president will hold a press conference. I guess a big boy press conference is what we're calling it, and take some questions from y'all. Now, we're working to also set up some additional meetings, bilateral meetings. The only two that I can speak to right now are with the UK Prime Minister and President Zelensky, but I have no doubt there'll be additional bilats. And as we get more fidelity on those, we'll let you know. Finally, as customary for summits the United States hosts, there'll be a Leaders, Spouses, and Partners program hosted by Dr. Biden. Now, if I could just quickly turn to Ukraine, because back to the context for what this meeting's all about, I think it's important to just do a quick update here what the situation is on the ground. Since the passage of the supplemental in April, the president has authorized 7 security packages to help Ukraine, including 5 drawdowns of munitions and equipment. The resumption of that U.S. aid has made a significant impact on the battlefield. Instead of the nightmare scenarios that were predicted several months ago about what we could see heading into the NATO summit, we've seen the situation stabilize. Ukrainian forces have successfully stopped Russia's attack north of Kharkiv, denying Russia the ability to take that city and limiting Russian gains to areas just across the border. The Ukrainians have held the line in Chaziv Yar. They've held fast east of Pokrovsk, hardening their defenses and ensuring that Russia will not break through. And they've halted Russian attacks in Zaporizhia. Throughout these last 3 months, the Russians have attacked relentlessly across all those fronts. And the price that they have paid for the few meters that they have gained here and there has been extensive. Heavy casualties, destroyed equipment, disrupted supply lines, degraded morale. The people of Ukraine have yet again demonstrated that when supplied and when supported by the international community in the United States, they can hold off the largest, though certainly not, I think is clearly evident, the most capable army in Europe. Their success is not just limited to the front. Ukraine has put U.S.-provided ATACMS, the long-range strike missiles, to good use in Crimea, destroying Russian surface-to-air missile systems, commandos, airfields. They sunk the last cruise missile-capable warship in the port of Sevastopol, and the Russian Black Sea Fleet has now fled Crimea in response. While it has been heartening to see Ukraine hold on in this critical period, we should not forget the grim reality. Russia continues to bombard frontline towns with massive and low-accuracy glide bombs and sending missiles at Ukrainian cities, including over just the past weekend, where they hit a hospital, a children's hospital. Russia has ramped up its campaign against Ukrainian electrical generation, depriving the civilian population of power and attempting to set the conditions to punish them over the fall and the winter. To strengthen Ukraine's air defenses and to help Ukraine protect its cities and its grid, the United States and several of our allies will have several big announcements at this week's summit. And the NATO alliance will announce significant new steps to strengthen its military and political partnership with Ukraine to help Ukraine continue to defend themselves today and to deter Russian aggression well into the future. These elements, taken together with bilateral support, are part of a bridge to Ukraine's NATO membership. Together, the Washington summit will send a strong signal to Mr. Putin that if he thinks he can outlast the coalition of countries that are supporting Ukraine, he's dead wrong again. As President Biden has said himself, Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, for free people refuse to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness.
Thanks, Ben. Good.
Thanks, John. You mentioned the context of this summit this week. It's also the first time the president interacted with these world leaders since that disastrous debate against former President Trump 10 days or so ago, where the president struggled to confront the former president on all sorts of things. What is the president's, does the president feel how does he plan to reassure American allies in NATO that he's up for the job now when he couldn't confront Trump on stage then?
I think the question presupposes the notion that they need to be reassured of American leadership and President Biden's commitment, and I don't believe that's the case. We're not picking up any signs of that from our allies at all, quite the contrary. The conversations that we're having with them in advance, they're excited about this summit, they're excited about the possibilities and the things that we're going to be doing together specifically to help Ukraine.
So you've seen zero, there have been stories in multiple outlets on both sides of the Atlantic over the last several days with questions from European leaders about the president's capacity to lead the United States. Are you just denying that? I'm
not aware of any such conversations that have been had, certainly none with us and here at the White House and with our staff. We're looking forward to it. I want to go back to what I said at the beginning. In the last 3 years, rather than browbeaten and insulting and demeaning allies, this president has invested in allies and partnerships. And when he took office, what I said, only nine allies had reached the 2% level. Now 23. That's not by accident. That's because of leadership. That's because of constant stewardship of the alliance and other partnerships around the world. The president's record speaks for itself, and the allies and the non-NATO friends and partners that are coming as well, they know that. They wouldn't be coming. New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, to a NATO summit if they didn't believe in American leadership and how important it is, and if they didn't believe that President Biden takes that responsibility extremely seriously.
Admiral, good to see you. On the point about European countries, NATO members boosting their defense spending, that was something, though, that was a big concern of the last president. It's part of the reason many of them are boosting their funding.
And it was a concern of the president before the last president. As you recall, President Obama said the same thing. This pledge goes back a decade or so. But the numbers speak for themselves, Ed. I mean, rather than browbeating and yelling and screaming and complaining and whining about it, President Biden invested in this alliance. And just the last 3.5 years now, more than double the number of allies have reached that 2%.
Two questions on the fallout from the debate. Have you, in your meetings with him, ever seen him appear similarly to the way he did on debate night?
Look, I'm a spokesman.
And you're in a lot of meetings with him.
I am. The last thing I'm going to do is sit here and talk about every meeting I've had with the president. What I can tell you is, what I saw in that debate is not reflective of the man and the leader and the commander-in-chief that I have spent many, many hours with over the last 2.5 years in terms of the specificity of the way he probes, the questions he asks. Heck, just this morning, he was asking me questions about the situation on the European continent that I couldn't answer, and I told him I had to get back to him.
When he met with governors last week, he suggested he'd like to curtail events that begin after 8 p.m. at night, just because he'd rather focus on resting and doesn't want to have a long day. In your understanding of things, has the National Security Council ever withheld information from him he should have known late at night out of concern he might not be able to process it?
No.
Russia has bombed Ukraine's largest children's hospital, as you noted. Do you believe the timing of these strikes is meant to send a message to NATO ahead of this week's summit?
It's hard to draw a line, Mary, to that. I mean, sadly, this is par for the course for Mr. Putin to hit civilian infrastructure, and he doesn't care whether he's hitting hospitals or residential buildings. I can't draw a line that this is some sort of message. But look, I mean, as I said, what you're going to see over the course of the week is a very set of strong signals and messages to Mr. Putin that he can't wait NATO out, can't wait the United States out, that we're going to continue to support Ukraine.
I'm sorry. Okay. I just wanted to ask about the air defenses and some of the sort of deliverables that are coming out of the NATO summit. Can you walk us through what you think will be happening in terms of any additional commitments in addition to the funding packages that come? And can you say a few words about this project to sort of consolidate the way that weapons are going to Ukraine through the distribution center that I think there's a center that'll be set up in Wiesbaden under
Coordination.
Coordination.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. The purpose for me to come today was just kind of give you the laydown of the summit ahead, and not to get too far ahead of the leaders and the specific deliverables. But so without doing that and without getting fired, I'll just tell you that you're going to see some announcements on air defense. You're going to see some announcements on deterrence capabilities, not just with respect to helping Ukraine, but boosting the alliance. You're going to see some announcements with respect to the defense industrial base and how to shore up that and make it more resilient and invest in it more, including in our own industrial base here in the United States. And you're going to see, as I alluded to, some discussion about Ukraine's path to NATO and what that can look like, and a reaffirmation of what the president has long said, that NATO is in Ukraine's future.
Just to follow up on that, can you say whether the word irreversible will be in the communique?
I'm not going to get ahead of the specific language one way or the other.
And then just on Israel and Gaza, can you say anything about the Israeli response to the Hamas response to the ceasefire proposal? Lots of responses.
Yeah, so no surprise to y'all, I'm not going to negotiate here from the podium in public. I would just tell you that there has been some back and forth As you know, we have a team in Cairo right now that includes Brett McGurk and the director of the CIA. They're meeting with their Egyptian, Israeli, and Jordanian counterparts, and there'll be follow-on discussions after that over the next few days. Look, we've been working this very, very hard, and there are still some gaps that remain in the two sides and the positions. But we wouldn't have sent a team over there if we didn't think that we had a shot here, and we're going to take every shot we can to see if we can't get this ceasefire deal in place.
Within days?
I couldn't give you a date certain.
Good, David.
Thank you. John, thanks for doing this. First, just to follow up on the communique, even if you can't get into irreversible, the president's objection last year and Chancellor Schultz's objection, if I remember Vilnius correctly, was that neither one of them wanted a date set for fear, I assume, that the United States and its allies would be drawn into the ground war if Ukraine was still at war while a NATO member. Does that remain today to be his primary objection? Is he willing to do wording that just is short of a date? Because even if you do the word irreversible or not, it doesn't really change the meaning very much of what you published in Vilnius. And I have a second on just the level of...
Look, I'll make this simple but unsatisfying. Again, I'm not going to get into the text and the discussions about what the draft's going to look like, David. I think you can understand that. But I do think your question is important to provide some context to. The president still believes that NATO is in Ukraine's future. What that future looks like depends on an awful lot of factors. Right now, you got a war going on inside Ukraine, and the focus rightly's got to be on helping them win that war. And we are, as I detailed in my opening statement. Number two, for any country that wants to join NATO, any country, and it's an alliance of democracies, the democracies have to meet certain guidelines, particularly when it comes to governance. And we are and will continue to work with Ukraine on reforms that are necessary for any democracy that wants to be a member of NATO. And then the third thing I'd say is, you know, it's a unanimous vote. Everybody has to be on board with that, and that can take some time as well. So the focus is on making sure that they can win now, and that we can continue to work with Ukraine so that there is a path to NATO. The last thing I'd say is back to the bilateral security agreement that the president signed with President Zelensky at the G7 in Italy. I mean, we're one of many other nations that have done that too, because we know that whenever this war ends, however it ends, and whatever the border looks like, Ukraine's still going to have a long border with Russia that's going to need to be defended, and they're going to need the reassurance of being able to put forth a capable and competent defensive capability against Russian forces going forward, and that's why we're making sure that there are things in line to make sure that Ukraine can defend itself.
One follow-up on that. You mentioned that it was 10 years ago that the 2% GDP goal was set. Obviously, there was no war underway at that time, and so the entire security situation looks radically different than it does than it did when that was set.
Well, I beg to differ. There was fighting in Afghanistan, and Mr. Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014.
Yeah. But I think the 2% made that.
It was in Wales. It might have been set up before the invasion, but nevertheless, it was still a tense security environment.
Right. We're in something much different today. I think we're all in agreement, just given the amount of arms
no
and
argument.
so forth going in. So, is part of the president's message at this summit that 2% is in the rearview mirror, that the NATO allies are going to have to be spending significantly more than that, maybe double that, for some countries, some larger economies? Or is he going to stay away from numbers? I know it's politically sensitive with all of them. You mentioned the word win. I was wondering how you're defining that.
Okay, there's a lot there. The president's not going to set a new bar or a new level of GDP spending on defense here at this summit. The goal is 2%. It was a commitment everybody made 10 years ago. Not everybody's there. Most of the remaining nations that haven't reached 2%, most of them, not all, are working on it and are getting there. And so I think the president wants, to focus on that. Wants to laud and commemorate those who have, but also make it clear that those who haven't still have some work to do. On when, I think we've been consistent about this. I mean, at least I think I have. I mean, we want all of Ukraine's sovereign territory respected, which means we want no Russian forces in any part of Ukraine by the internationally recognized boundaries.
John, you just said, answering a question to Zeke, you're not picking up on signs of allies needing reassurances when it comes to President Biden. But the allies also look for a secure United States. Have you heard any conversations from the allies about issues of the elections process here, what they've been seeing, and the stability of the United States in the next few months, couple of years, etc.?
I'm not aware of any specific conversations with respect to our domestic political situation. But look, April, we watch the domestic political situation of our allies and partners, of course, like we did with the UK and with France over the weekend, and we have no doubt that they're watching ours as well, and that they'll be watching our election with a lot of keen interest. We certainly would expect that. But I'm not aware of any conversations that we've had at senior levels here, at the NSC or elsewhere at the White House, from allies specifically about this particular election.
The European Union who gathered reporters a couple of years ago with concerns about democracy here?
They might be talking to y'all, but I'm not aware of any specific conversations here.
Just want to circle back, Admiral, on Ed's question. So you said broadly that the president, in your view, is not represented by what was on the debate stage. Then you gave us an anecdote about a meeting today where he was engaged and so forth. Are you saying you have never encountered a situation where you thought that he was displaying any of those symptoms or affectations or something that would give pause, or are you just declining to answer one way or another?
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable answering these kinds of questions because as a spokesman, my job is to be an advisor and counselor, and I don't think it's appropriate for a spokesman to... Yeah, I did because I wanted to make it clear. So, yes, I'm uncomfortable with these kinds of questions, but to answer your specific question, in my experience, the last 2.5 years, I have not seen any reason whatsoever to question or doubt his lucidity, his grasp of context, his probing nature, and the degree to which he is completely in charge of facts and figures. And if he isn't, what I've seen is, because it happened to me this morning, when he isn't and when I can't be in command of those facts and figures, I have to fess up and go get the information that he's asking for. And he asked me some questions this morning I didn't have answers for.
Okay, Nadia. Thank you, Karine. 2 questions on the Middle East. Israel has conducted the largest seizure of land in the West Bank, which undermines the president's vision for two-state solution. So why the White House has been not mum on that, and will the president...
We have not. It's not that we've been mum. There was a statement put out by the State Department about this call for settlements. Nothing's changed about our view that settlements continue to be counterproductive to peace and stability and the possibility of a two-state solution. We don't support that.
And second, you mentioned about the Ukraine and Russia in terms of the civilian casualties. The UN said today that actually half of the facilities of UNRWA has been hit and 520 people have been killed in addition to the aid workers. So do you still believe that Israel is doing what it takes to protect civilian lives, including women and children?
We certainly believe that they need to continue to do more to protect innocent civilian life.
Not doing much. I mean, I've been asking this question for 9 months.
Your question wasn't about what they're doing or not doing. Your question was, do we believe that they should do more? And my answer is yes, they need to do more to protect civilian life. And we're going to continue to have conversations with them about how they're prosecuting these operations.
Thanks, John. Just sticking with the Middle East, but connecting it to the other big story. During the ABC News interview on Friday, George Stephanopoulos asked the President, was he, quote, the same man today that you were when you took office 3.5 years ago? And the President's reply began, in terms of successes, yes, I was also the guy who put together a peace plan for the Middle East that may be coming to fruition. Now, it may or may not be coming to fruition. We don't know. We do know 38,000 people have been killed in Gaza, almost 2 million displaced, and according to UNICEF, 1 in 3 children under the age of 2 is suffering from acute malnutrition. Does the President consider his Gaza policy a success?
The President believes wholeheartedly that this ceasefire proposal that we are trying to get done will make a big difference in terms of not only temporarily ceasing hostilities, but potentially giving us an opening to end this conflict. It's important to remember how this started, and you talked about our Gaza policy. I'll state it for you again. We want to make sure Israel has a right to defend itself from the kinds of attacks it suffered on the 7th of October, which I know is easy for people to forget. 1,200 people slaughtered, most at a music festival. Number 2, that Israel is doing everything they can to protect innocent civilian life. Is it enough? No. They need to continue to do more. And that we are doing everything we can to give humanitarian assistance into the people of Gaza. That's our Gaza policy. And as the President has also said, we would be and will still continue to be willing to adjust the policies that we are executing with respect to Gaza as we see things unfold on the ground.
But the broader question was, does he consider his policy to have been successful?
Israel is defending itself against a terrorist attack, so we can check that off. Humanitarian assistance continues to flow. In fact, if it wasn't for the United States, I dare say that not a fraction of the humanitarian assistance that is getting into Gaza would get in. Is it enough? No. And the Israelis have taken some steps to be more precise, more discriminate, and more careful in their operations. Is it enough? No. So we're going to keep at it. We're going to keep working on this.
Is it enough? No. The President described Israel as bombing, indiscriminate bombing in December. 7 months have passed and you have paused 1 arms shipment, as I understand it. Is that correct?
That's right. Is there a question here?
Do you think that that's an effective response to indiscriminate bombing of a civilian population?
It's never